Hi, and welcome to Chapter 4. We're on the tissue level of organization. So we're going to talk about these four types of tissues today. There's connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. We're going to describe the characteristics, the common locations, the functions of epithelial tissues. We're going to describe the general characteristics of connective tissues and then cite some examples. We're going to distinguish between the three types of muscle tissue in terms of structure and function, and we're going to describe the general characteristics, types, and functions of our nervous tissue. So this is just an infographic of our tissue. So you can see that this is nervous tissue up here. There's some epithelial tissue, some muscle tissue, and some connective tissue. So nervous tissue is pretty cool because it is excitable and it's used for communication within our body. Epithelial tissue is where we're going to have any coverings, linings, glands are going to be epithelial tissue. Muscular is also excitable and it allows for movement. So muscular tissue, we have it in our heart. We have it around our organs for digestion. We also have it in our skeletal muscles. And then connective tissue. So this is for binding, protection, and support. So let's just review again. We have these cell germ layers. So remember that we had totipotent cells. Totipotent cells are able to differentiate into any type of cell. And then we have multipotent, and multipotent cells mean that they can differentiate into multiple types of cells. And so we're going to have our mesoderm, our ectoderm, and our endoderm. Okay. And so what happens is we have like that sperm and the egg. They're going to start to develop and to grow into what's called a blastocell and then a blastula. And then at the gastrula phase, that's when we're going to really see the differentiation of these different cell layers, these cell germ layers. So we have the endoderm that's showed in the green here. We have the mesoderm, which is sort of that reddish orange color. And then we have the ectoderm on the outside in that blue. Okay. And so this, we can see some embryonic origin to our different types of cells. Okay. So we have the ectoderm. The ectoderm is going to be that outer layer again, and it's going to eventually differentiate into our skin cells and our nervous system cells. So there's some neurons right there. Okay. Then we have our mesoderm. The mesoderm is the middle layer. It's going to become all of our connective tissues as well as our muscles. And then the endoderm is going to be the inner layer. This is going to become the glands, the airways, and the digestive system. Okay? And so this is just showing you we have some mucous membranes, some serous membranes, some cutaneous membranes, and some synovial membranes. Okay? So mucous membranes, those are going to line our digestive, respiratory, urinary, reproductive tracts. These are coated with secretions of the mucus glands, and they're going to, anything that's sort of internal but open to the external environment, right? So we eat our food, that came from outside, that's got to go through our digestive tract. We breathe air that comes from outside of our body, it's going to go into the respiratory tract. Food and drink, urinary, and then reproductive tracts, right? So anything that's going to come into contact again with something from the outside environment. Serous membranes are going to line the body of cavities that are going to be closed to our exterior of the body. So we have the peritoneal, that's in the tummy area, remember, the pleural right around our lungs, and the pericardial around our heart. Then we have cutaneous membranes. Cutaneous membranes, that's essentially the skin, and it covers our entire body surface. And then synovial membranes are going to cover joint cavities. They produce this fluid within the joint. Okay, and so here we can see them, right? There's the mucous membranes. This is what they look like when we sort of look under the microscope. Okay, we have this lamina propria, which is an areolar tissue. Okay. Then you can see the epithelium and then the mucus secretions on top. Okay. And then we have our serous membranes. Remember, serous membranes are going to be those membranes that are closed. Okay. And so we have areolar tissue here, and there's the epithelium. It's much thinner. Then we have our cutaneous membranes. This is a picture of our skin. Okay. So we have this dense irregular connective tissue. There's our areolar tissue. Okay. And then this is a synovial membrane. Okay. And so similar, there's that areolar tissue. We have some epithelium in here. Okay. Oops. Okay, so epithelial tissues. We distinguish epithelial tissues as to their shape. So what do they look like under the microscope? okay? And so there's three shapes that we're going to talk about, sort of. We have the squamous or the squamous, we have the cuboidal, and the columnar, okay? And so if you were to imagine for yourself right now, we were making pancakes, okay? So first we're making pancakes. Pancakes are going to be our squamous cells, right? So everybody in your head, imagine a pancake with a little dollop of butter right inside of it, okay? And so that butter, that's going to be like the nucleus, and then we have these pancakes. And when we just put them next to one another and line them up along the plate all next to each other, then they're simple squamous epithelium, okay? Simple means it's just one layer. We can also have them stacked up, right? I can make a stack of pancakes. So when I make a stack of pancakes, those are called stratified squamous epithelium, right? So stratified means stacked up. Squamous is the shape. They're real flat. And epithelium is what they are, okay? So pancakes. Then we're going to move on to, let's go with a cupcake, okay? So cupcakes are going to be cuboidal, right? So I'm going to take these cupcakes and I can line them up along the plate all next to each other. Right? Those are cuboidal. Now, I can also stack some cupcakes on top of each other. And when I do that stacking, it's called stratified cuboidal epithelium. Okay? These are columnar. I'm having a really hard time coming up with what kind of columnar pastry there may be. Let's go with an eclair. Okay, so these are eclairs standing up on their side. Okay, they are columnar, and we can line them up simply. Okay, so one layer, simple columnar. We can also stack them one on top of each other and build sort of an eclair cake. And when we do that, we get stratified columnar epithelium. Okay. Now there's also this little extra piece. It's called pseudostratified, and pseudostratified is a little bit different, and because if you look here in the simple, you see how the nuclei are just sort of lined up along a row. And here in the stratified, we can see that they're very neatly stacked. And so we can see the nucleus or the nuclei for more than one. This is pseudostratified. And so when we look at the pseudostratified, when we look under the microscope, it sort of looks like, could they be stacked? I don't know. We don't always see the cell membranes when we look under the microscope. This is a drawing. And so it sort of looks like, oh, it could be stacked. Okay. And it could have cilia or microvilli on there. Okay. So what's the difference between cilia and microvilli? You may have heard of cilia before. Cilia is sort of a hair-like structure, and cilia is typically used for movement. Microvilli, on the other hand, looks very similar when we look under the microscope, but microvilli's job is for absorption. It gives us more surface area for absorption, right? What's surface area? Let's review that really quickly. If I took a whole block of cheese from the store and I put it in a pan and tried to melt it, it would take hours, right? But if I shred the same amount of cheese and I give it more surface area, that's more spots for the pan to touch it, but same amount of cheese, right? If I do that and I put it in the pan, it melts a lot faster. Okay. So epithelial tissues are going to derive from all three embryonic layers. So we get the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. Okay. Ectoderm is going to differentiate into the epidermis of the skin, the lining of the mouth, and the anus. The mesoderm is going to be the lining of the blood and the lymph vessels. And the endoderm is going to be the lining of your respiratory and digestive tracts. What is epithelial tissue like? Well, one, it's highly cellular. That means there's a lot of cells. And there's very little extracellular material between the cells. They are very tightly packed together. They're continuous, and they have these specialized connections. We call them tight junctions and desmosomes. Okay, a tight junction, this means that they are very closely packed together. Okay, and they're sort of sitting with one another. We also have what are called desmosomes, and desmosomes means that they are actually like attached, almost like buttoned to one another. We call them sometimes rivet junctions. A rivet would be like if you ever have like a jacket with the little metal buttons that they kind of like click together, or a baby onesies on the bottom when you click those together. Okay, and so those are like desmosomes. So they actually like snap into one another. So very tightly packed together. They are always attached to a basement membrane. The basement membrane is made up of airy, loose connective tissue. Okay, and they exhibit polarity, and that means that there's a top and a bottom. The top is called the apical surface, and the bottom is called the basal surface. Okay, so let's look at our picture again, right? So we always have polarity, meaning that there's a top and a bottom. Okay, and on the bottom, we always have this basement membrane. This would be like the plate if we were putting our pancakes on it, right? The basement membrane, we're always putting them on a plate. Same idea here, okay? And they have polarity, meaning there's a top, this is the top surface, or the apical, and this is the bottom, which is the basal, okay? And at the basal surface, we have the basement membrane, okay? So let's look at some of these intercellular junctions. These are for animal cells, obviously, because humans are animals. There's these tight junctions. These are where we have these two cells and they are forming a watertight seal. Okay, we see this in our skin surface, right? If I put water on top of my skin, it is not somehow seeping through my skin, right? Desmosomes are those rivets that are going to fasten them into really strong sheets. And then gap junctions are actually just what it sounds like. It's a little gap between, and these are channels, and they can allow ions to pass through. Ions, remember, are those positively charged molecules or atoms, positively charged atoms. There are sugars. Sugar, it would be like glucose, C6H12O6, and then small molecules can also pass through. Okay. What kind of epithelial tissues can we see here, right? This is actually a picture of our skin. You can see some stratified squamous cells here. Okay. They are really squished down like pancakes, and they are also stacked a lot. And then here we might have some stratified cuboidal cells. This is that basement membrane down here. Okay. So again, when we talk about epithelial tissues, how do we classify them? Well, it's based on the layers, right? So simple means just a single layer of cells. Stratified, two or more layers. We've stacked them up on top of each other. And then what is the cell shape? So they can be squamous. That means flat and thin like a pancake. Cuboidal, square or box-like, like a cupcake. And then columnar, rectangular, or taller than they are wide, like an eclair. This is glandular epithelium, and glandular epithelium, that means it's going to have a gland, and it can consist of one, that means unicellular, or more than one, multicellular cells. Their job is to synthesize or to make, create, and then secrete a chemical substance. This could be hormones, sweat, neurotransmitters. Okay? And there's two different types. We have endocrine and we have exocrine. Okay, so there's also two different types of exocrine glands. There's multicellular and unicellular. Endocrine glands, those are the ones that are secreting the hormones inside your body. Exocrine is secreting something outside. Okay, and they must have a duct for the secretion to get out. So this is one of those unicellular glandular epithelial cells. These are called goblet cells. Okay, and these goblet cells contain this globs of mucin. Okay, mucin for mucus. Okay? And what its job is to release that mucus. We also have multicellular glandular epithelium. Okay, and so we have simple and we have compound. So let's talk about what does that mean. So these we talk about based on their shape as well. Okay, and simple versus compound. So this is simple alveolar, okay? And so this simple alveolar is also known as acinar, okay? And it has just one duct you can see here, okay? And this is the glandular cells down here, okay? And then this is simple branched. It almost looks like a clover, okay? And it has, again, one duct. Okay, so that tells us it's simple, and it can be alveolar, sort of like a ravioli, or it can be simple branched, alveolar. We also have simple tubular. It's tubular, dude. So this simple tubular right here, it looks like a tube. It can be simple coiled tubular because the tube is sort of coiled. And then we can have simple branched tubular. Okay, now, then we can have compound alveolar. So what does that mean when we have compound versus simple? Well, it has to do with the number of ducts. okay? Number of ducts. So here, one duct, one duct, one duct, one duct. It's like duck, duck, goose, okay? So here we go. These are ducts, not ducks, okay? So we have that duct there, duct there, duct there, right? So just a single duct tells us that they're going to be simple. When we have more than one duct, it becomes alveolar. So here's a compound alveolar, compound tubular, and to make it even more complicated and fun, we can also have compound tubulo-alveolar. Fun, right? So how do we get these secretions out of us? Well, there's different types of secretions for these exocrine glands. Okay, so we can have merocrine. Merocrine is also sometimes called ecrine. Okay, so you're going to see both of those, and they secrete their substances through exocytosis. Okay, so remember we put it into a little secretory vesicle, and we very gently and nicely send out that secretion. This happens for our salivary glands in our mouth to make our saliva, as well as our sweat glands, and then some pancreatic secretions for digestion do it this way. Okay? Then we have apocrine. Okay? Now remember apocrine or apical up here, this is our apical surface. Well, during apocrine, the apical surface also sort of like pinches off a portion, and inside of it has the secretion. Okay? This happens for mammary glands, like for breastfeeding. Holocrine. Holocrine is fun because that means that the whole cell actually disintegrates or explodes to secrete the substance. This happens with our sebaceous glands on our skin. Sometimes these overreact and we get pimples, right? So the whole cell is sort of exploding, right? It's a pimple exploding. Imagine that, a pimple exploding, holocrine. There's also different types of secretions for these exocrine glands. Okay, so we have serous glands. Serous glands are going to do watery, and they contain what's called amylase. Amylase is an enzyme to help us digest amylose. And then there's mucus glands. Mucuses can be watery to rich. It has mucin in it. Okay, this would be like a snot or some sort of like mucin makes sort of that sort of thicker kind of secretion. Okay. All right, so that was all epithelial tissues. How are we feeling about epithelial? All that good stuff, epithelial. So that was this. Here, those epithelial. So now we're going to talk about connective tissues. Connective tissues. So all connective tissues are going to types they're deriving from the stem cells in the embryonic mesenchyme. They are not in direct contact with each other, but they're separated by an extracellular material called a matrix. So epithelial tissues, remember, they were lining up, really touching each other on that plate, but the cells of these connective tissues, they don't do that. They're much more separate, okay? And they're kind of contained within this area called a matrix, not like the movie The Matrix. The matrix is composed of the ground substance and the fibers, and they can vary between connective tissues, and they can give them their inherent characteristics. Blast cells, okay, so remember that. Anything with that word blast at the end is going to create the matrix. It's blasting it and making it. And then anything that says sites actually gets trapped in the matrix, and they maintain it. They keep it going, okay? So let's talk about these three connective tissue components. Okay, so we have to have ground substance. Now this ground substance, it can be a liquid, a solid, or a gel. Okay, we also have to have extracellular fibers, so we can have collagenous fibers. Collagenous fibers would be like that word collagen, if you've heard of that. Okay, reticular means net-like, and then elastic. So just like what it sounds like, elastic fibers are going to be able to stretch and then recoil, just like elastic would. Okay. And then it has to have cells. We can have fixed cells and we can have wandering cells, meaning that they can move. Okay. So these three things are required in order for it to be a connective tissue: ground substance, extracellular fibers, and the cells. Okay. Now, when we have these extracellular fibers and the ground substance together, we call that the extracellular matrix. Okay. That's the matrix that we were talking about. The matrix surrounds and separates the cells, and it provides an important structural and nutritional support to them. It allows them to be further apart than those epithelial tissues or cells, but still connected, right? So you can see that here. This is cell, 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 cell. Those are all the fibers, and then that blue stuff would be the ground substance. Okay? So what are the different types of connective tissues? Well, we have connective tissue proper. And connective tissue proper can be loose or dense. Okay, loose or dense. So the loose fibers, they're going to create, the fibers create a loose open framework. This would be like that areolar tissue, like at that basement membrane that we were talking about. Adipose tissue, which is a fatty tissue, and reticular tissue. And then we can have it be dense. Okay, we can have dense regular or dense irregular. We can also have elastic. Then we have our fluid connective tissue. Fluid connective tissue is going to be our blood. What? Yes, a blood. It is, in fact, a tissue. Your blood is a tissue. It is a fluid connective tissue. And then our lymph. And I don't know if you're familiar with lymph yet, but this has to do with our lymphatic system, with our immunity. Okay. And then we have supportive connective tissues. Supportive connective tissue is cartilage. Hopefully you've heard of cartilage. And bones. What? Mind blown again. Also, bone connective tissue. So here are just a couple of connective tissue examples. So we have our connective tissue proper, areolar, adipose, reticular. This is just if you like charts better than if you liked this fun chart. But same idea, same information, just put in a table instead of a chart. Okay? So let's talk about some soft connective tissues. We have loose connective tissue, dense irregular connective tissue, and dense regular connective tissue. What? So this is loose, okay? And so the fibers are really far apart. See all those fibers? They're really far apart. And this one is dense, okay? So dense means that the fibers are packed in there, okay? Now, dense irregular means that there's not a real distinguishing pattern happening with all of these fibers. Dense regular, we can see an identifiable pattern right there. Fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are very exciting because they are the most abundant connective tissue proper cell. Okay? Their job is to synthesize or make all that extracellular matrix, right? So that's what I told you, those blast cells, they're making that matrix. They play a critical role when we have to heal ourselves with any wound healing. They also help to make those collagen fibers, right? Any fibers. Fibro means fiber. So they're shooting out the fibro and they're blasting it out. They're making all of it. So we have these collagen fibers that we have to make, elastic fibers and reticular fibers. Okay, collagen fibers, maybe you've heard of that in your skin. Everybody needs some more collagen in their skin. That helps us to not have any wrinkles. They are flexible. They have a tensile strength, meaning that you can sort of pull on them, move them, and they can come back. These are going to be our tendons and our ligaments. Okay. Elastic fibers are also very flexible. They can return to their original shape, so we can stretch them out. This is like your underwear elastic. Stretch it out, and hopefully it can return back to your shape after stretching or compressing. So if everybody just pushes on your face real quick and then let go, look at that, your face went back. And your skin and your vertebral column are made out of this elastic fibers. And then we have reticular fibers. Reticular fibers are similar to collagen fibers. Okay. They are going to provide an anchor and a support for our parenchyma. That's going to be the functional cells, the blood vessels, and the nerves. They're found in our soft organs like our liver and our spleen. So here's some areolar loose connective tissue. Proper. So remember, this is that basement membrane of those epithelial tissues. That's the plate. This is what our plate is made out of. Okay? And it contains all three fiber types. It has collagen, reticulin, and elastin fibers. And the ground substance has these proteoglycans. Proteoglycans are fun because their job is to hold water for us. Okay? And when we can hold water, it allows us to have more flexibility with our skin, more movement. These are reticular loose connective tissue proper. So we have a lot of reticulin fibers. They're sort of those dark fibers on the right, and they're found in the spleen, the lymph nodes, and the bone marrow. And so what it does is it allows sort of those white blood cells to get caught in the net and hang out there for a little bit. Adipose tissue. Adipose, again, is a fancy name for fat. Okay, and so this is where we're going to store our triglycerides. Remember, we already talked about triglycerides a couple weeks ago. So triglyceride storage, it's going to be stored here. All those triglycerides are stored up lipids, and it helps with shock absorption and then thermal insulation. It's also going to be found in the subcutaneous layer, that means under the skin, and then our surrounding organs. And we also have two different types of adipose tissue. We have white adipose and brown adipose tissue. Most adults are no longer going to have any brown adipose tissue, but for children, especially in infants, we actually find a lot of brown adipose tissue surrounding the heart and the lungs, and sometimes even up closer to the brain. And so that brown adipose tissue is going to help to keep their internal organs warm. Okay? They have a higher metabolic rate, those brown adipose tissues. Okay? This is dense regular connective tissue proper. So remember, it's dense, meaning those fibers are really close together. Regular, meaning that I can see a pattern to them. And it's connective tissue. These collagen fibers are lined up parallel. It gives us a tensile strength. It resists pulling and weight bearing in the direction of the fibers. This is tendons and ligaments. That's what helps us to move our muscles. Dense, irregular connective tissue proper. Dense, fibers close together. Irregular, we have a lot of angles there. We can't really see that distinguished pattern. So this tensile strength is going to be in all directions. We're going to see this in the dermis of our skin. That's the second layer of our skin. And then our shoulder capsule. Everybody move your arms around a little bit. Get some workout. And you can see that you can actually get that shoulder to move in all different directions. Okay, circumduction, right? Dense elastic connective tissue proper. We have these elastin fibers. They give the quality of the stretch and the recoil to the tissue. We're going to find this in our larger arteries, our aorta, which comes right off of the heart. Okay, every time your heart beeps, not beeps, beats. Every time your heart beats, we're going to actually have a large volume of blood. It's going to go out of the heart, and it has to go through our aorta. Really, I mean, it's a large amount of blood going straight through that aorta. And the aorta is not as big as the ventricles that the blood's coming out of, okay, out of the ventricle. And so it's going to sort of stretch out really quickly to get that large volume of blood, and then it immediately is going to recoil back to its shape. Okay. This is fluid connective tissue. Woo! Fluid connective tissue is going to be our blood, right? So we're going to have the cells circulating in that liquid extracellular matrix, okay? And also our lymph does that. We have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The matrix is called plasma, and our plasma is made up of water and some suspended proteins. The plasma here would be like the white background, okay, that extracellular matrix. And then these little purpley pink, I guess, color, pink dots, those are red blood cells. The little purple, dark purple is going to be our white blood cells. And then this little teeny tiny dot right there is a platelet. And here we are to cartilage. Okay, there's different types of cartilage. There's hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is the most common one, and it is actually the precursor of bone, meaning that it's going to come before bone. We actually lay down some hyaline cartilage, and then we lay down bone on top of it. It's the most common. This is what we find in our ribs, our nose, our larynx, and our trachea. Okay, hyaline cartilage. Then we have the fibrocartilage. The fibrocartilage is going to be found in our vertebral discs, our joint capsules, and our ligaments. And then our elastic cartilage is going to be found at our external ear, the epiglottis, and the larynx. So what happens here is that we have these chondroblasts. Okay, chondra right here, that means cartilage. Blast is that, remember, to create, right? So we're creating that matrix and becomes trapped within the matrix in the holes. And these little areas here, you can see sort of that white area, and then you see a nucleus. Right? This is the lacuna. It's sort of a cocoon that the cells become trapped in, and then we're going to have them be chondrocytes. Okay. So the ground substance here, which is going to be sort of that reddish color, it just stained sort of that reddish color. It has chondroitin sulfate, which is going to bind to the proteins, and that creates proteoglycans. Remember, proteoglycans hold the water, helps to resist compression of our cartilage. This is bone. Bone, again, is a connective tissue. It is very unique in that the extracellular matrix contains these collagen fibers, and it's embedded within what's called hydroxyapatite. Everybody say hydroxyapatite. Oh, wait, you didn't say it. Okay, so hydroxyapatite is just a calcium phosphate, and it actually gives bones its hardness. Okay, but also bones are flexible. How can it be both hard and flexible? It's very complicated, and we're going to get all into that when we get to the skeletal system. But to give it the flexibility, we have collagen, right? And collagen is in fact flexible. And then the hardness is that hydroxyapatite. And bone is highly vascularized. That means it has a lot of vessels pouring through it, lots of blood vessels. Look at all these blood vessels coming through the bones. Okay. Muscles. Woo. Okay, so we've made it through. I'm backing us up all the way. Epithelial. Ooh. And connective. And now we're going to go do some muscle tissue. Muscle tissues don't take that long. So, muscle tissues. We have skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Okay. Skeletal muscles, these are the ones that are going to be attached to our bones and any entrance point to our body, like at our mouth and our anus. Okay. And they are long and cylindrical fibers. They are striated. What does that word mean? Striated means striped. And they are many peripherally located nuclei. Look at that. Multinucleated. Multinucleated. That means more than one nucleus per cell. Okay. More than one nucleus per cell. Its job is for voluntary movement, produces heat, and helps to protect our organs. Smooth muscle right here. Smooth muscle is short and spindle shaped. Spindle shaped is sort of like really long with sort of a belly coming out of it. Okay, oops. And there's no evidence of striation here, no stripes. There's a single nucleus within each fiber. Okay. This is for involuntary movement. So it's going to move our food involuntarily through our digestive system. Like once we swallow, that's kind of it, right? We don't sit there and say, okay, stomach, let's move it through our stomach. No, we don't do that, right? And so we actually have this smooth muscle that helps with that. Involuntary control of respiration when we're just breathing involuntarily, and it helps to move secretions, regulates our blood flow in our arteries and by our contractions, right? And then we have cardiac right here. Cardiac is short branched. It is striated, but the striations are a little bit hard to see. By the way, when I say striated, I'm not talking about these white lines here. I'm talking about the ones that go across like this, and you'll see those more in your lab classes. Okay. But right here, okay, and so cardiac is, again, it is striated. The stripes are gonna go in this direction. Okay. It helps to contract to pump the blood of our heart. We only find cardiac muscle within the heart. Okay, so that was muscle tissues. Yay! Nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is found in our nervous system, so our brain, our spinal cord, as well as our nerves. Okay, our peripheral nerves coming off of our spinal cord. Every neuron is made up of a cell body. This is the cell body right here. The cell body is also called a soma, S-O-M-A. Off of this, we also have dendrites. Dendrites are where we're going to receive that signal. And then the signal is going to travel here down the axon. The axon is covered over by these Schwann cells here in this image. And those are forming the myelin sheath. Okay, myelin sheath. That's going to insulate. The neurons are going to be supported by glial cells. Sometimes they're called neuroglial cells. Glial cells are supportive cells. The nervous tissue cells do not touch one another. Instead, they have tiny gaps between them. So like if we were going to connect this one to another neuron, we would have another neuron right here. The dendrites would be attaching here. So you would just take a copy of that and put it over here. Okay. And so the dendrites would be here, but they wouldn't actually touch one another. There would be a tiny, tiny gap, and that tiny gap is called a synapse. Synapse. So these are those glial cells for supporting, remember those neuroglial cells. So we have astrocytes. Astrocytes are called astrocytes because they're shaped like a star, and they help to regulate our ion concentration. They also can reuptake any neurotransmitters, and they help to form our blood-brain barrier, right? Because our blood and our brain don't touch. Our brain doesn't have blood around it. Instead, it has CSF, or cerebrospinal fluid. We have oligodendrocytes here. In this case, the The oligodendrocytes in our central nervous system, which would be our brain and spinal cord, are going to form that myelin sheath. But in our peripheral nervous system, which are going to be all of those nerves, it's formed by the Schwann cells. Okay? So our tissues actually have to be able to repair themselves, and they do that through this sort of inflammatory response. Okay? And so inflammation is actually this initial response to any injury. Okay? So if we get injured, we have mast cells. Mast cells are these traveling cells. They're all throughout our body, and they detect any injury to our nearby cells. When they detect that, they release histamine, and histamine starts an inflammatory response. Okay? So what does histamine do? It increases the blood flow to that area. It's going to bring in phagocytes. Phagocytes are white blood cells that help to neutralize any pathogens. The blood influx is going to cause that wound to swell, right? If I bring more fluid to an area, it's going to swell, and blood is fluid, right? So it's going to swell up and get bigger. It's also going to cause that area to become red. Why? Because blood is red. Okay? Even when it doesn't have oxygen in it, it's still red, guys. It's still red. And it's going to become warm, right? Blood is hot, right? The blood inside of our body is much hotter than the outside of our body. So if the blood has to go to the surface and then we touch an area, it's going to become warm. And it's also going to become painful. Okay? So this is our inflammatory response. What happens when we get older to all of our tissues? Well, our connective tissues, for instance, our bones are going to become porous and weak. They're going to get little holes in them. We're going to have less calcium stored there. Our tissue repair is going to slow down. Our muscle tissue can atrophy. This is like a normal muscle. Atrophy means it sort of gets smaller and weaker. Our nervous tissue, we also can see some atrophy there and some demyelinization. So that means that the oligodendrocytes and our Schwann cells are not as effective in covering over that axon. So it slows down the signals. Sorry about that, my phone rang. And now, can you describe the characteristics, the common locations, and the functions of the epithelial tissue? Describe the general characteristics of our connective tissues and cite some examples. Distinguish between the three types of muscle tissues in terms of structure and function, and describe the general characteristics, types, and functions of our nervous tissues. I hope that you can. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. Thank you so much.